I think the prototypal autism parent who deals with regional center in California fall into a couple classes of experience, generally, loosely. One would be, okay, your kid is under 3 and already has clear evidence of a developmental disability, so you get under 3 services. That person does not know, typically, that under that statute, services end at age 3. Now, the regional center is supposed to do a reevaluation for Lanterman eligibility, and that can be done anytime after the 2nd birthday, but typically they don't do it, and oftentimes on close cases, they just kick the kids out of the regional center when they're 3. And so I've met a lot of parents who have older kids, maybe in middle school or something, and the kids, to me, are moderate to severe, and it's like, why don't you have regional center services? Answer, they kicked us off at 3. Okay, so that's one area in which parents need to work. They need to be prepared for the reevaluation under a new statute, the Lanterman Act, at 3. And they need to be prepared because one of the things that happens at 3 is the regional, or slightly before, the regional center has a transition meeting also to transition the family to the district for school-based services. In theory, though, if the regional center evaluation shows that you should be eligible over age 3 because you have a qualifying disability and a substantial handicap in 3 or more areas, they would continue providing services. That has changed a lot, though, because so many people now are getting the services that they want through an insurance plan, but there are still other things that regional center can provide aside from ABA services. And of course, if your insurance does not cover ABA because it's not an employer-funded California plan, self-funded plan, or it's a plan from another state that doesn't cover the treatments in question, then they're still on the hook for that. But assuming you are not that 2-year-old who gets kicked off, what if you're an older kid and your parents hear for the first time about regional center programs and they decide to try for eligibility? What do you do at that juncture? Well, I think it's really important to talk for a moment about mindset. Regional center eligibility is for life, although the regional centers are providing less now than they have historically because of insurance coverage for ABA services. They still have a mindset that if somebody gets made eligible, they are going to be a regional center consumer, as they call them, for life. And so there is a notion that regional center was developed to cover only a very small number of consumers, people who had intellectual disability. The goal was to keep them in the home. Unprepared for was the autism epidemic. There's tons of cases. So they're always going to try, if they can, to exclude people from that lifetime eligibility. So knowing that that's the mindset, when you go to regional center, you call them and you say, I want an eligibility determination made for my child. They will do an intake. And then typically they are going to refer you to an outside psychologist, a private psychologist. In kind of contradistinction to the school districts, regional center continues to contract out those services. So it's not like the classic school district situation where you have an employee of the district who's paid by the state. So the less money there is, the less they get paid. So it's an outside private person. And in some ways, those outside private people, there's a better chance that they're going to give you a fair shot and be objective. But again, we have the phenomenon of kind of the institutional bias, because if you're a psychologist and regional center sends you 10 evaluations and parents come to you and they purchase 2 private evaluations, you're going to want to keep that income stream going. So I don't mean to sound cynical, but there really is this issue of mindset. And so when clients come to me, usually with children that are 10 or 15 or whatever, and they want to secure regional center eligibility, I tell them that it may not be enough to go through the intake process and have an intake from a regional center's, contracted for psychologist. they may need to get their own assessment. And that's a little bit hard to swallow because the price tag can be expensive. I'm not really going to talk about that too much today, although we should sometime. But if you're able to do that, you need to go to an evaluator who knows what the rubric is for regional center, because the eligibility standard is not the same as autistic-like features, let's say, which is a kind of a pretty broad category for public school eligibility, right? They're going to have to write the report and say you have a qualifying disability and justify that factually. And then they're going to have to show how you are substantially disabled in 3 or more areas and justify that factually. So first of all, they have to test, okay, to do that. And in theory, they could put it together with reports for other people, but you want testing. And then they have to write the report in the right way so that when you hand the report to the regional center psychologist, it's all there for him. Somebody, had an evaluation last year, and they said, well, can't the regional center kind of cherry pick through all the reports and stuff and figure this out? And I said, no, they can't. You can't assume that they will. And you can't assume that they're going to look at stuff unless you put it right in front of them. So to me, your first contact with the agency, if you're applying on behalf of an older child, or even a younger child, is here's the report, and it lays it out for them. And if your evaluator can use public school data, public school generated data to make the case, that is hard for them too, because what they're going to oftentimes do is go and get all the public school records, which they are entitled to, and they are going to use those to try to make the case that you're not substantially disabled. So I think where we are is you ideally would have a private assessment so that you're kind of the first opinion that they hear, rather than their own contracted for person who may want to offer up something that is satisfying to the regional center goal of limiting eligibility. The other thing is, if you have a private evaluation from somebody reputable, the regional center contracted for psychologist is not going to be comfortable necessarily in a professional sense going up against that person. So for example, we have an expert we use that sat on the dissertation committee of a school psychologist in one of the districts where we now work. She, the school psychologist, does not want to go up against this expert because this expert sat on her dissertation committee and some interesting stuff went down. So you're trying to get an evaluator that's going to be, well regarded and intimidating to everybody concerned. And that's kind of how you want to start.
I love that you apologize for being cynical, Bonnie, but the fact of the matter is that we have to be adults about this, and these are some of the realities, and I appreciate you sharing that because, we like to tell people here, always know where the money is in the discussion, because it does affect things. And if the person who is, directly tied to the money strings is the person who's evaluating your child, I think it's adult to assume that there may be some conflict of interest for them, and that where your child is concerned, and the services that they're going to get, you need to be aware of that so that you're working the system the way you need to get what your child needs. It's a reality. So I appreciate you saying that. I want to ask you too, Stella has written in and said that she really would love to find an attorney in Pennsylvania and would like for you to repeat the website again because she's not sure she wrote it down. Right. So what is the website to go to find the attorneys?
Okay, I'm going to say it and then spell it and then I'll say it. It's
okay.
COPAA.net, COPAA.net. COPA.net, which stands for Council of Parents, Attorneys, and Advocates.
Okay, so COPAA.net.
Yes.
Great.
Exactly.
Okay, and I'm sorry I interrupted you, but go right ahead.
No, that's okay. I think, you make your call, you get in the queue, you go in for your appointment. The initial appointment is an intake. That would be an appropriate time to give them all the paperwork. Now, if this is somebody that's working with me, what I will do is I will have them deliver, or I will deliver after the meeting, something, that's a cover letter that actually explains the underlying report. And that serves two purposes. One, it informs them very specifically of what I think they will find when they look at this report and the conclusion that they ought to reach when they read the report. And two, it's like, hi, I'll be helping you with this eligibility determination process, which I think sometimes is actually, can be meaningful. So then what happens is if the child is over 3, they have 120 days to conduct their evaluation, have an IPP meeting, and get an individual program plan document in place. So something to watch for is delay, because they are very liberal with the timelines. Some regional centers sometimes, and if they do not conduct a timely evaluation, in theory, you could request a hearing in front of the state hearing office that listens to regional center matters, and your argument would be untimely. And I don't think it would ever get to that point, because I think if there was a filing saying they were late, the regional center would turn around and really quickly complete the eligibility determination. But that would be an option. And then, in that process, in the 120 days, they're going to collect their records, they're going to talk to whomever they want to talk to, and they're probably going to assess your kid. And the reason I say probably is I've had a bunch of cases where they didn't do an assessment, and they write you a letter that's like 2 sentences long, and it says, we, decline to find you eligible under the Lanterman Act. So that sounds bad, but it's actually good, because if they find you ineligible based on no information, and you have a private report and you request a hearing, you're the one that's going to have the, all the evidence. And so that would actually be advantageous. But, just want people to know, sometimes they don't do even a full-blown evaluation. And it's really hard to know why. I've been told by somebody that used to work for a regional center that there were certain times of year that they wanted to accept more cases because it had budgetary implications, and there were other times when they didn't. We'd all like to be a fly on the wall. I'm not really sure how it all works, or if there's there doesn't seem to be any consistency necessarily. But you're in your 120-day window, and if you become eligible, then the issue is what services are you going to get? Or what services might you get? And if you have a disagreement about what services you do get, what vehicles do you have to address that?